Welcome to Creating High Functioning Student Group in Hybrid and Online Courses, presented by Simon Ringsmith from Oklahoma State University. Simon, welcome to present.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's nice to be here. I've been thoroughly enjoying the sessions this morning. Hope you have too. Been taking lots of notes, and I just want to thank Brad and the other leadership for putting this on. This event or this presentation isn't so much technical in nature, so I will talk a little bit about some technical tools later in the presentation, but really, this is more focused on practices, strategies that you can use as an instructor to create high functioning student groups, regardless of the method that you use to teach, whether it's hybrid, online, face-to-face. If you've been having issues with student groups, that's hopefully what we'll aim to solve here this morning. And as always, I appreciate any comments, questions that you have. I've got the chat window open, and like the other presenters, I'll try and end after about 15 minutes here. Maybe we'll just see how things go, and then save the rest for Q&A. So just so you know where I'm coming from, this is me teaching my project management class. I'm actually an instructional designer at Oklahoma State's Institute for Teaching and Learning Excellence. So what I tell people at Thanksgiving and Christmas is I help professors be better teachers. We don't so much work on the research portion, we work on the teaching portion. So that's really our bread and butter. And as a way of making sure that I practice what I preach, I'm also a faculty member. And I've been teaching for the Spears School of Business for several years. The fall of 2014 is when I first started teaching my project management class. And traditionally, I teach this class in person. It's kind of a flipped class. And if anyone is interested in my experiences teaching flipped, I could talk all day about that. A lot of things I've learned about that. But for 2020 and 2021, it was hybrid/online. And like everyone else, we had to adjust to this new mode of teaching. And that's, I resisted going fully online for a long time, but then this past year, it really wasn't an option anymore. We had to embrace online. And one of the big components of this class is group projects. 40% of my students' grades are group projects, and that's a pretty big chunk of their grades that is all relying on working together and collaborating. And one of the things that I tell my students is it's a project management course. I would be doing my students a disservice if I didn't incorporate group projects in a project management course. If I didn't involve them in group in a group environment in my class, then I wouldn't really be preparing them for a future in project management. And that kind of leads me into one of the first practices that you can do. And some of these you might think, well, that's kind of obvious. And it is, or some of these might be, but I want you to think if you've done these, if you've taken the time to do these, or if you've had this modeled for you. So one of the first things that I do, and I encourage others to do, is have a rationale for group work. In my time in undergrad, back at University of Nebraska, in my time in graduate school, like you all, I had a lot of group projects from time to time, but it was never really clear to me as a student why we were working in groups other than the professor said so. In my class, I make it clear that I'm doing them a favor by giving them an experience of working in groups. I want it to be an authentic team-based learning experience because that's what they'll be involved in as project managers. And if I just had group work for the sake of group work, I wouldn't get the same level of buy-in from my students. I tell them that this is a way to apply concepts that we're learning in class in a real world collaborative environment. So it's a 16-week class. We don't have time and resources to do an actual full project. I'm teaching them about managing projects, but we simply can't manage an actual real life project. But working in groups is a way to mimic that. In class, we're sort of participating in the activities that they would be doing outside of class by doing group work. doing a group project in class mimics a real project management environment, and it's a chance for students to work as a team to solve problems and draw on the strengths of each group member. And I explain this clearly to my students. This is why we're doing group projects. And that's one of the most important ways you can start a group project, is help your students understand why you're doing it. Now, you could say, well, I'm the professor. I don't have to explain myself to anyone. And that's true. You don't have to, but you're going to get better buy-in from your students if you can help them understand why you're doing it. Yes, they'll have to do it for a grade if you just tell them we're working in groups. But if you can help them make connections between the material and the coursework, especially as it comes to group work, you're going to get better results from your students as they go throughout the mechanics of doing the group work throughout the class. So make sure that you have a clear rationale for your groups and that you explain that to your students. And it's regardless of whether it's online, hybrid, face-to-face, if you can tell your students you're going to be working with other people and here's why, that's the mode of instruction doesn't really matter at that point. What we're doing is preparing our students for success in our groups by helping them understand why we're working in groups. Another strategy that I like to use as I talk about effective group works is the tried and true Bloom's taxonomy. I pull this slide up in class, and this is during the first day of lecture or the first week of the online class. I show them this slide and I say, here's everything that we're doing in class. At the bottom level of Bloom's, just remembering that's your weekly quizzes, your regular low stakes quizzes. And this doesn't take much brain power to do, just simply remembering things. They have to read the textbook, they watch the videos, and I give them quizzes to make sure that they can remember that and recall that information. It helps that stick in long-term memory. Then the in-class work, or for the online students, I call it their scenario analysis work. That's where they take the information that they have remembered, and that's where we apply it and we understand it. So we're working our way up Bloom's, and I'm totally transparent with my students. And it goes back to the idea of giving them a rationale. Here's why we're doing all the things that we're doing in class. The reason for your in-class work is that's an opportunity for you to take everything that you learned before when you took the quizzes, before we really got into it, and now understand it and apply it. And then we're going to work our way higher up Bloom's, and this is where we start to get into group work. For analyzing and evaluating, that's where their first big group project is. That's where they work in groups to analyze a project management case study. And by showing them this slide and by helping them understand this is how everything fits together, it leads to those aha moments where students go, oh, I get it now. This is why we're doing group work. It's not just some random assignment. I'm working my way up this pyramid here. And now in my case study analysis with my group, I'm going to analyze this case study based on everything I've learned and evaluate this case based on everything we've learned. And finally, their final group project is they have to create a fictional OSU IT project. We don't actually do the project, but we create the building blocks for this project. And they present this to me and to the class. And that's where they're at the top level of Bloom's. That's where they're creating something new. And they can't create a good framework for an OSU IT project if they haven't done all of this work down here. And these two, the group projects, exist at the highest levels of Bloom's. And by helping my students understand how group projects fit into the rest of the class, it leads to greater buy-in from my students and much better results from the actual group project. Now, there's a couple barriers to group projects that are common across a lot of educational environments. And we see these in a lot of different classes. Number one, a lot of students see groups as unnecessary, gratuitous, just not really, kind of an annoying obligation rather than an actual learning opportunity. Oh, we're working in groups. Here we go again. There's this perception that groups are just one of those things that they have to do without really seeing the benefit of group projects. There's also problems with unclear expectations for group members. And we see this all the time, especially at the undergraduate level, where what we tell our students is we say, okay, you need to form groups, or here's your groups. And now in 4 weeks, you'll have this thing due. Good luck. You'll have to meet outside of class and you'll have to write some papers. But as far as individual group member expectations, you're on your own. And we're not setting our students up for success when we do that. There's also unclear expectations for group roles and outcomes throughout the group project. And the most common one, lack of common meeting times. We set our students up for failure if we are teaching in a traditional or hybrid class environment and we tell them that they have to pick a meeting time outside of class, because our students, what I've learned in teaching undergrads for the past 7 years is these kids are busy. And that's not just, they really are. More than when I was in college, and I worked to put myself through college and I thought I was busy. These kids are in clubs, they have jobs, they have brothers and sisters that they care for, they have fraternities, sororities. It's unrealistic to tell our students that they should just meet in groups. Good luck, everyone. You need to find a time to meet in groups. And what happens, and you've seen this if you have any experience teaching undergrad or grads, you've seen this where it'll be time to present and turns out your groups met for the first time the night before their presentation or a couple days before their presentation. That's when they were finally able to meet. Now, if you teach in a flipped class, what I've done is I teach Tuesday, Thursday. Because it's flipped, Tuesday we do a bunch of classwork. Thursday, we don't have class. Thursday is reserved for their group meetings. And I tell my students, class meets 9 to 10:15. And I say, look, all of you are free from Thursdays from 9 to 10:15. I checked your schedules. You don't have any schedule conflicts because that's when we would have this class time. So instead of meeting for class, that's when you're going to meet with your group. And that makes all the difference in the world. I promise you. Don't treat group work as something that should take place outside of class time. Bring it into class. If you want effective groups, give your students time to work in groups. If you have a job, so we all have jobs, my boss doesn't expect me to work with my team outside of work hours. So why should I expect my students to get all their group work done outside of class hours? It's class work. It's relevant to what we're doing in class. Give them time to meet in class. Don't see that as taken away from your class. Oh, I can't sacrifice my class time. My class time is so valuable. I can't let my students meet in groups. No, your class time is the ideal time for your students to meet in groups. Give up your class time and let them work in groups in class, because that common meeting time makes all the difference in the world. If you teach online, have your students use Doodle to specify, to set some sort of common meeting time and hold them accountable for having a meeting time. And let them know it doesn't have to be long. It can only be 15 minutes, but they need to find a time where they can meet together on a regular weekly basis. So here's some strategies for success. And there's some things coming in chat. I'm just going to save those to the end. Otherwise, I won't get everything done, but I want to get to the things in the chat here. So here's what you can do for effective groups. Number one, you have to tell your students why we're working in groups. If they understand why they're doing it, then they're going to be more likely to buy in. And they might not agree with it, but at least they understand it. And they're just like my colleagues, Christy and Gina, they taught at Sanger Ridge Elementary School here in town for 20 years. And now they're instructional designers here on campus. And they like to say that the kids don't grow older, they just grow taller. I have kids, my kids are 9 and 7 years old, and if I can explain why we're doing it, then I'm more likely to get them on board. And college students are no different. We have to tell them why we're doing this and explain how these group projects are going to help them in class, why they're relevant to the real world. We need to give clear expectations. Here's one thing: we need to allow for student choice. let your students have some say in the matter. Maybe you let them decide how often they want to meet. You let them decide what their goals are for the meeting. You let them decide who their leader is. But if you can give up some control and let your students have some control, then they're going to take ownership of this. Set a timeline for deliverables. My goodness, I made this mistake my first year of teaching. It was a 6-week project. And I said, okay, here's all your deliverables. They're due in 6 weeks. Good luck. I just bombed it. Students they turned in terrible work. So I started setting a specific timeline. After 2 weeks, these are due. 2 more weeks, these are due. 2 more weeks, this is due. Then your presentation. Guiding them along and setting those milestones throughout the project made a ton of difference in terms of the quality of work that they delivered. Don't make everything due all at once. And also hold students accountable. Now, I see this a lot. It's not enough just to sign a contract. And a lot of instructors do this. And they say, okay, everyone, we're going to work in groups. Here's a contract. They have students sign this contract. As a group member, I agree to do this and this and this. And they sign it and it's all good. And then the instructors wash their hands. We signed the contract. Well, you need to be revisiting that. Hold students accountable for fulfilling their end of the deal on the contract. Make your students evaluate each other. Give your students an opportunity to provide feedback for each other, either throughout the project or at the end of the project. But let your students know that if they're not meeting their your expectations, you're going to follow up on that, and their peers are going to follow up on that. A couple other things. Give students a way to communicate. Don't just tell your students you got to work in groups and let them have free reign. Make sure they have a way to communicate, and communicate. That is I could say every one of these is the most important thing. They're all the most important thing. Don't just assume your students know how to communicate with each other. Give them a way to communicate. Now, we have Canvas, and in Canvas, every student group has a private homepage, and you can use that as a way to let students communicate. Or you can say, here's some apps that work. Now, it turns out on OSU, most students use an app called GroupMe. Well, that's great. Some students are on GroupMe, some are on Discord, some are on Slack, but you have to at least say, if nothing else, here's something that you can use. Canvas private group homepage. If you want to use something else, that's fine. But everyone has that same starting point. Also, allow for some flexibility with meeting times. And this is important if you're doing online. If you have groups agree to certain times that they're going to meet, but they need a little bit of flexibility, let them have that. If you're teaching in-person class, groups meet during class time, but maybe there's someone who commutes from Tulsa every day and they just can't quite make it every Thursday. So that's fine. Give them a flexibility. Allow them to meet outside of class time. Allow them to meet separately in a different location. I tell my students when I teach face-to-face, I say, okay, we meet Thursday in room 104 classroom building from 9 to 10:15. Your group doesn't have to meet in class. You can meet wherever you want to, but you got to meet somewhere. These kids meet at the library. They meet at Eskimo Joe's. They meet at their dorms. They meet on the library lawn on campus. But they meet during that 9 to 10:15 class time. And I hold them accountable for that. And allowing them to decide some of those things, like where we're going to meet, that helps them take ownership of the group. If it's an online class, suggest times, but let the students choose. Also, have your students submit weekly progress reports. This was a big deal. This ensures that groups are doing their work. Now, could they lie in their progress reports? Yeah, but I typically don't have that. Most students are pretty straightforward in their progress reports. Ask relevant, timely questions. I'm going to show you an example of progress report here. Ask them, where did you meet? How did you meet? Did you meet on Zoom, Slack, Discord? Did you meet in person? Who's present? Who's absent? For those who are absent, do you know why they're not here? Did they communicate with you and tell you why they're not here? I'm telling you, they are honest. They will tell you, yep, Phil was absent and he told us he was sick. Or Sherry was absent and we don't know where she is. Have the absent members communicated with their teams? XYZ, ask them in the progress report. You got your risk analysis due in 1 week. How's it going? Are you getting it? Or do you have questions still? What are your plans for next meeting? Is there anything else that you think I should know? here's an example of a progress report. We use Microsoft Forms. If you have Microsoft, a Microsoft 365 license on campus, I encourage you to use Microsoft Forms. And here's an example of progress report. I say, what group are you in? Check this out. Give them better names than Team 1, Team 2, and Team 3. Give them interesting names. I go for silly animals, axolotls, blobfish, chinchillas. It's A, B, C, D, but nobody wants to be on Team 5. That's boring. But instead, if you're Team Francolins, well, that's interesting. And now you have this common element as you're starting your groups where you're all like, what is a blobfish? Let's look it up. I'm telling you, that makes a difference. We're not the Oklahoma State humans. We're the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Go Cowboys. We're not the giving people that sense of team identity makes a big difference. So I ask him, what's the topic of your case study? Where did you meet today? List your members who were here, who's not here. Why aren't they here? Tell me, how are you doing on parts 3 and 4? And just let them type. How did it go last week? Great. Okay. Not that great and awful. How are things going with everyone pulling their own weight? And they'll tell you, they're honest with this stuff. This is due in 9 days. Are you going to do it? Yeah, not sure or not good. Down here, I even ask them, what are your goals for next Thursday's group work time? Is there anything else you think I should know? Here's what their responses look like. Everyone filled it out that week. They told me, here's our case study. We met on Teams, Zoom, Discord. You can see real quickly, everything went great. Someone said we had a few problems, and now you can follow up with them. Microsoft Forms is integrated with our campus's authentication system. So I know who responded, and I go through these progress reports, and if they're having problems, I email them and I say, okay, it looks like you had some problems. What can I do to help? And down here, is there anything else you think I should know? Everything seems to be going well. Nope. Hope you're staying warm. All is well. Here's another one, progress report 5, same idea. I get some good responses here. I want to show you something though, that this was case study. I believe this was the second one. If I look at the responses, go way down here. Okay. Someone's not been to any of the meetings. I spelled someone's name wrong. So now I can follow up with this person and say, hey, Lindsay, do you know what's going on there? I see you weren't at any of the meetings. But these progress reports make a big difference, and your students know that they have to fill them out. So it helps them hold each other accountable. I got just a couple things left here. Weekly progress reports, we kind of already went over that. I got this email this morning, so I put it as an extra slide in my presentation. Professor Ringsmith, I failed my group today. I did not submit the progress report in time. We met at our usual time today like normal. I just didn't complete the report afterwards like I normally do. If you would, please give my team credit for the meeting today, but not me. It was my responsibility as the leader to submit the report on time, and I didn't do it. Thank you for your time. You guys, I want to cry. I mean, seriously, Caleb fell on his sword for his team. And I wrote him back and I said, Caleb, thank you. I said, I appreciate you taking the fall for it. I'll give your team full credit and I'll give you half credit. But I also told him, I said, Caleb, this is what makes a leader. You were willing to take responsibility for this, and that's the mark of a good leader, and I appreciate it. I didn't tell my groups, if you don't turn it in, someone's going to have to email the professor and all that. Caleb has risen to this level, and this is not the first time. I have this happen once or twice a year where the group leader, and they self-select a leader, and the leader is just responsible for turning stuff in. The leader I'll get an email like this. And this literally happened this morning. I'm not making this up. So let me give you a little bit of feedback that I got from my students. I asked them, how was the group experience in this class? We were all very satisfied with our group and decided to continue with this group going forward. I see that so often. Canvas randomly selects students for the first group project. And then I say, okay, for the second group project, you all can select whoever you want to work with your friends, work with whoever. And most of the groups stay together. I'm really lucky to be able to join this group. Everyone in our group has made a lot of efforts in this assignment. We've made sufficient preparation, both in terms of clothing and content. I don't know what the clothing is about. We all did our parts. Carter received the best score because he did extra work. Would be in a group with them again. Overall, we worked well considering we were a virtual team. This is probably the best experience I've had with the group during my time at OSU. Being randomly selected, I think we're fortunate to have good chemistry. No, I hear this a lot. And it's not that they had great chemistry, that Canvas randomly knew who to put in a group. It's because I designed my groups to be successful. And this is not an accident. So I had group experiences. I had really good experiences. I like this group. The group did an amazing job. We always told each other when we couldn't meet, and it goes on. So I want to get to the chat because there's some things coming in. But the point of all this is there's ways that you can create high functioning groups, that you can set your groups up for success. And it's not complicated. It doesn't involve fancy technology, but it involves some work on your part and a little bit of creative thinking. And you can have groups that succeed much more than what other people thought. I just want to look at the chat. Let's see. One of our student workers had the exact situation. She failed the group project because her group never decided who was going to do what. Yeah. Hold them accountable. Ask them on your progress reports and make those graded. Say, tell me who's in your group and what are they doing? What are the roles in your group? Let's see. I like the idea of giving feedback during the process so students can make adjustments along the way. Yes. Don't just create your groups and then abandon them. Be involved in them. In fact, if you teach online, set a time where you can meet once with every group during the project. So it's a 6-week project. Okay. You have once in that 6 weeks, meet with each group and just check in with them. How's it going, everyone? Is there anything I need to know about? That kind of thing. Tammy says, Kathy, that's why I hated group projects when I was in college. I did too. I couldn't stand group projects because all of these problems, we never had time to meet. We didn't know expectations. So you can work to solve those. You can head those off so that we're not having those same problems. I need a better tool to get students to admit whether or not they contributed. Yeah, I give my students an evaluation at the end of the project and I say, okay, tell me how you did and tell me how your group members did. And then I'll use that. I'll take that into account. It's 10:26. I got to wrap it up here. But if you have any questions, send me an email, simonringsmith@okstate.edu. I can't promise I'll solve all of your group problems, but there's to make your groups more high functioning. There's some simple but highly effective strategies that you can employ that aren't based on fancy technologies. It's just simple ways of altering how you approach group work.